Hello, 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 beautiful and amazing people. How is everyone? Welcome to the Wealthy Trustee webinar. How is everyone? I see we got Kathy, Cedric, Crystal. We have iPad, iPhone, Jasmine, Laurel, Rochelle, Tari, C, and more people coming in. So, welcome. Thank you. So tonight, I am going to be teaching you guys how to actually set up a trust. So if you are intentional about building generational wealth, then you are in the right place, okay? Because tonight I'm going to teach you some fundamentals on how you can actually protect the assets that you have and how you can acquire more assets using a trust and building wealth that way, okay? So let me introduce myself. My name is Christina Yvette. I am a trust strategist. I have been a trustee since 2015. And the way that I became a trustee was by way of real estate. So I was actually a registered nurse and I was working 5 days a week, 12-hour shifts, literally, on the rat race. And I was actually burnt out. I was burnt out after a year of doing that straight. And at that time, I had a 1-year-old baby, and I realized that I was spending more time with my coworkers than I was with my 1-year-old son. So I knew that I had to create some form of passive income or a second income stream. So I decided to start learning about real estate investing. I went to a seminar, signed up for mentorship, and what ended up happening was 6 months after I attended that seminar, I bought my first property, right? So it was an investment property that I flipped. I bought that property for $89,000, flipped it for $235,000. But before that even happened, what I did was my mentor told me, you need to put that property in a trust. Why did he tell me that? Because one, it was my first property and I was inexperienced. But two, he wanted me to protect myself and protect the asset because the property was going to be renovated. And so anybody could have got injured on the job, right? They could have stepped on a nail, plywood could have hit them in the head. Anything could have happened. And then what? That's a lawsuit that I was not expecting and the potential for somebody to take my first property away from me. So I took heed to what my mentor was telling me and I put that property into a trust. And I have been operating in trust ever since. So tonight, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you guys the fundamentals that you need in order to set up a trust so that you could also protect your assets, whatever it is. It could be, a house, it could be a car, it could be cash money, jewelry, real estate, whatever it is that you want to protect, a business, anything, okay? So with that being said, we're just going to dive right in. So I have a short presentation for you guys, and then after the presentation, we're just going to dive right into Q&A, okay? So with that being said, let's get started. So you guys came here to learn about trust, okay? So we want to know, what is a trust, right? What exactly is a trust entity? A lot of us, we've heard the term trust, but we're not familiar, right? We don't know, what exactly is it, right? So the first thing is that it's an entity. So you are an entity, I'm an entity, a business, a corporation, those are entities. So a trust is also an entity. How is this entity created? It's created in the form of a contract, okay? So when you are actually setting up a trust, you are actually establishing a contract, all right? And there's several different parts to this contract. The two most important parts that I want to tell you guys about is the declaration of the trust. That is actually where you're declaring what it is. So you're declaring, hey, in this contract, I am setting up or creating a trust. And then you're declaring what it is not. So you're declaring, hey, this is a trust that I'm setting up, and it is not a corporation. It is not a partnership. It is not a LLC. It is not anything else, okay, but a trust, okay? So that is the first part of the actual contract that you're creating. The second part is the actual agreement. That is where you have what we call provisions, okay? So I'm going to be giving you guys, throwing out some definitions there, write them down. If you have any questions after the webinar, just let me know, okay? But I just want you guys to get familiar with the terms that we use when we're talking about trust, okay? So, agreement, right? So the word indenture means agreement, okay? And so what we're doing is we're creating this contract, and we are actually putting rules and regulations of how we want this trust to be operated, okay? So it's going to be operated by the trustee. So we'll get into that in just a moment. But like I said, a trust is an entity, you are an entity. So anything that you can do, a trust can do. So if you can buy a house, a trust can buy a house. If you could, build credit, a trust could also build credit. If you could write a book, a trust could write a book, okay? So there's really no limitations to what a trust can do. So it's very powerful if you have a trust within your structure, okay? So, so let's keep moving on here. All right, so now that we're talking about a trust is actually a contract, there are several different parties involved in this contract, okay? So the three main parties that I want you to be aware of is the first party is the grantor. All right, the grantor is the creator of the trust. That is the individual who establishes the trust, and they establish it for the benefit of somebody else. That other person is the beneficiary, okay? So what the grantor does is the grantor is the one who creates the trust, puts the rules and regulations, and then either funds the trust, so put some kind of asset into the trust, okay? So the second party involved is the trustee. The trustee is the controller of the trust, meaning that the trustee is the one who's running the show or running the trust or the operations on a day-to-day basis, okay? The trustee also has full control over all of the assets inside of the trust. So the trustee is what we call the fiduciary, meaning that they're responsible for the trust, and they are actually doing everything that they're doing for the beneficiary, okay? Because the beneficiary can't run the trust themselves. They are only in that position to benefit. So the next party involved is the beneficiary. So the beneficiary is what we call the inheritor of the trust, okay? So that means that they are there to actually inherit the assets that are in the trust once the trust is dissolved or terminated, okay? So your trust, it has an establishment date, so that's the day you created it. So if you're creating it today, then today's your establishment date. And then you have to determine how long you want this trust to exist for. So let's just say that you want the trust to exist for, 100 years, right? So then you know that it's going to expire 100 years from today. Once that trust expires, all of those assets go to the beneficiary, okay? Unless you want to actually be intentional about creating generational wealth, then what you're going to do is you're going to renew the trust, and you're going to renew it for an additional 100 years, okay? So keep that in mind when we're talking about the beneficiaries. Let's keep moving on. So now there's several different types of trust, you guys. There are hundreds of types of trust. You have to choose the right trust for you, for your family, for your business, for your organization, okay? So I'm going to give you some different categories that all trusts fall under. So the first one is express versus implied. So that means that an express trust is a trust where you have it in writing and it is in black and white, it's in the contract form, okay? An implied trust is an oral trust. So that's a trust to where you have an oral agreement between you and another person. All right. And so that trust may not hold up in court because it's oral, right? So out of those two categories, you really want an express trust, okay? So the next category I want to tell you guys about is statutory versus non-statutory. So with a statutory trust, that trust is actually created in a particular state, and it has all of the state statutes and codes inside of it. So in every single state, we have laws, right? So in my state, the laws are different from in your state. So those laws are called statutes, okay? And so when you're creating a statutory trust, that means that you're putting all of that specific state's laws inside of it. You're embedding it into the contract, which means that that state now has jurisdiction over that trust and can regulate that trust. And 9 times out of 10, that trust is now a part of the public records because it's usually registered, okay? Now, on the contrary to that, you have, and with a statutory trust, you are limited, which means that you can only use that trust inside of that state. You can't use it in another state, okay? So on the contrary to that, you have non-statutory. A non-statutory trust is where there's no state statutes and codes. So it's not falling under the jurisdiction of that state. It's actually falling under the common law jurisdiction, which means that because you're not restricted to one state, you can actually use it in the whole country. Okay, so if you set up your trust in Georgia, but you want to use it in California, you can do that because you have a non-statutory trust. So you have more room and flexibility to be able to use that trust. And it's usually private, so it's not going to be registered with the state or the county, which is exactly what you want, right? So now the next category I want to tell you guys about is simple versus complex. So a simple trust is a short trust, right? So there's not that many rules and regulations. And because it is shorter in nature, the trustee is actually required to give distributions to the beneficiaries. On the other side of that, you have a complex trust. So a complex trust is usually longer in nature, so it's usually 40, 50, 60 pages or more. And with that type of trust, because it has more rules and regulations in it, the trustee is actually not required to give distributions to the beneficiaries, okay? So the next categories that I want to tell you guys about is discretionary versus non-discretionary. So with a discretionary trust, that means that the trustee, which is the person who's actually controlling the trust, they have full discretion to be able to make decisions that's going to benefit the trust estate without having it being inside of the trust contract, okay? So if the contract doesn't say anything about crypto, but you as the trustee want to go purchase crypto for the trust, you can do that if you have a discretionary trust. On the other side of that, you have non-discretionary trust, which means that if it's not in the contract, you as a trustee can't do it. So you have those restrictions, okay? And then the last category that I want to tell you guys about is revocable versus irrevocable, okay? So let's talk about revocable, a revocable trust, right? So when we are referring to revocable and irrevocable, we are referring to what we call irrevocability. That irrevocability only belongs to one person. That one person is the grantor of the trust, okay? So I just want to lay that foundation for you guys. So now let's talk about the revocable one, right? So that means that the grantor has revocability, and so they can actually make changes to the trust. So once they create the trust, they can make changes to it. Once they create the trust, if they were to appoint trustees and beneficiaries, they can remove them or replace them or change them. If they were to put assets into the trust, they can take those assets out at any point in time. And if they decided one day, hey, I don't want this trust anymore, they could terminate the trust. So because the grantor, which is the person who created the trust, has so much control over the trust, it's actually seen as their alter ego, right? So it's seen as an extension of them, which means that if the grantor or the trustee or any other people involved in the trust have creditors or debt or anyone that wants to sue them, those assets that are inside of a revocable trust are not fully protected, and those creditors can come after the assets. So if that type of trust is sued, more than likely the judge would decide to pierce through that trust because it's revocable. And if the judge decides to pierce through that trust, that means that it automatically becomes a part of the public records because all court cases are. And that means that now everyone is able to search and see your trust, and they are able to see what the net worth is, the assets, the beneficiaries, who they are, things of that nature. So you don't want that to happen, because what you truly want is for your trust to remain private and for people out here in society, you know, like your neighbors or lawyers and you know, other you know, people, you don't want them to know what assets belong to the trust. You don't want them to know who the beneficiaries are for your trust, right? You want what we call obscurity, right? Which means that, it's not traceable, okay? So on the other side of that, we have irrevocable. With an irrevocable trust, we are talking, particularly about the grantor, that individual has what we call irrevocability. So if they were to create the trust, right, and if they wanted to make changes to it, they cannot. The trustee has to make the changes. If they put assets in the trust, they cannot take the assets back out. The trustee would have to sell the assets back to them. If they wanted to terminate the trust, they could not. Only the trustee can terminate the trust. And if they wanted to change the trustees or beneficiaries, they cannot, right? So the grantor has no power and no control with an irrevocable trust, which means that whatever assets are inside of that type of trust are fully protected. That is the type of trust that you want. The type of trust that one takes all of the liability, and then your assets are, fully protected in the event of a lawsuit. So if that type of trust gets sued, right, the judge is not going to pierce through an irrevocable trust, right? It would have to be a very rare situation, and you would be ending up in the Supreme Court if that were the case, okay? So you don't want your trust to get pierced because, like I said, it ends up in the public records, and then, people are able to search the public records to see what your trust has, what assets and the people involved, okay? So you just need to actually figure out the best type of trust for you, your family, your business, right? And so the trust that I recommend, which is based off of all the categories that I just told you, right? So I recommend an express trust, a trust that is complex in nature, a trust that is non-statutory, a trust that is discretionary, and a trust that is irrevocable. So it can have all 5 of those. That's the type of trust that you want. That is the trust that we call, and you might hear this term when you start doing your research, okay? What we call a bulletproof trust, okay? So that is the type of trust that you want. Let's carry on with the webinar. So how do you actually create a trust, right? So we just mentioned different types of trust, right, in the categories. And like I said, there's hundreds of trusts. So I want you to do your research. I want you to do your due diligence, okay? So once you have determined what type of trust you want, then the next thing that you're going to do is you are going to actually name the trust, okay? So you have the first thing is when you are ready to create your trust contract, you need to name that entity, okay? And so you can name the trust anything that you want, right? But you want to avoid naming the trust after yourself. Please do not do that. Do not name the trust after yourself. Why? Because remember, we said that you actually want your trust to be private and you want your identity to be private. So the last thing that you're going to do is name the trust after yourself, right? So if your name is, John Doe, you're not going to name the trust John Doe Trust, okay? So because then everyone is going to know that you're associated with that trust. So you're going to use names that are like, unrelated or, just random names like, Sunflower Avenue, right? So that people don't know that that property, those assets, or that trust, ties back to you, okay? So that's the first thing is don't put your entire name, okay? Some people do decide to use their last name, which is fine. The last name is not too bad as compared to your entire first and last, okay? Some people use abbreviations, initials, things like that, okay? The next thing that I want you to know is you don't have to have the word trust in the name of the trust. So it doesn't have to end in trust like how a corporation ends in Inc. or how an LLC ends in LLC, okay? So that's another thing that I want you guys to know. So now that you have named the trust, you're going to, as we're creating this contract, you're going to appoint the different parties. So the first party that you're going to appoint is the grantor, okay? So remember, we said that the grantor is the creator of the trust. If you're going to create the bulletproof trust, like we said, it's irrevocable. So the grantor has no power and no control. So what you want to do is you don't want to be the grantor, right? You actually want power and control. So you're going to appoint someone else to be the grantor on paper. So that person can be anybody. It could be someone that you are related to. So, for example, it could be, a cousin, it could be a sibling, it could be a neighbor, a coworker, anyone that is actually able to notarize the trust, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, now what you're going to do is you're going to appoint the trustee. You're going to appoint yourself as the trustee, okay? Why? Because you want all the power and control. You want to be able to make decisions for the trust, and you want to control all of the assets that are inside of the trust. So you're going to appoint yourself as the trustee. That's the most important position here. The next thing is the beneficiaries. So your beneficiaries can be entities. They can also be, your children, right? So usually people put their children as the beneficiaries of their trust, okay? And then the last one is a successor trustee. So the successor trustee is the individual who's going to be taking over after you once you are done. So you are appointing yourself as the trustee, and in the event that something happens to you, or you decide to resign, or, you become incapacitated, you pass away, any of those things, then someone needs to be able to continue to operate the trust. So you're going to actually appoint someone to be your successor, and they're going to pick up where you left off, okay? So now that you have all of the different parties involved, you know what you're going to name the trust, you're going to start working on that trust agreement, okay? So now you're going to create your actual contract. You're going to put all of those provisions, which are the rules and regulations of how you want the trust to be operated. So now that you're done with your contract, you have to legalize the trust. So what you're going to do is you're going to get it notarized, okay? And it needs to be notarized, and there's 2 signatures that are required, which is one, the grantor signature signing that they are actually agreeing to this creation of the trust, and the trustee actually signing that they are accepting their appointment as the trustee, okay? So now that it's notarized by the grantor and the trustee, the first thing that you want to do is you want to fund the trust, okay? So you're going to open up a trust fund. And when you're opening up a trust fund, it could be with, it could be any type of account. So it could be a checking account, it could be a savings account, it could be a money market account, it could be a brokerage account, okay? And it could be with a bank, it could be with a credit union, or, a brokerage, or any other financial institution that actually offers trust accounts. Not all banks offer trust accounts. So when you're going to the bank to actually open up your trust account, right, your trust fund, you're going to go with two things. The first one is the certificate of trust, which is proof of identity that the trust exists. Because remember, your trust is private, so you're not going to bring all, 70 pages of your trust to the bank. You're just going to bring the certificate of trust that shows that the trust actually exists, and the EIN number, so that they're able to open up that trust for you, okay? So now that you provided those documents, they're going to open up that trust account, and you're going to go ahead and fund it. So you can fund it with whatever the minimum is for that bank. So usually some banks are $100, $200, $300, upwards of $500 dollars. Some brokerage accounts can be like anywhere between $0 upwards of $5,000. So it just depends on the financial institution that you choose, okay? So now that you funded your trust, right, and you have a bank account for it, now the most important step out of everything that we're talking about now is for you to actually transfer your assets inside of the trust, because your assets are not going to be protected if they're not inside of the trust. The trust is the entity that's actually going to protect the trust, actually protect the assets, okay? So what does that look like? For example, if you have a house, right? What you need to do is you need to gift that house to the actual trust. And so now you have to record a new deed. So you're going to quitclaim deed that house from your personal name into the name of the trust. Why do you want to do that? Because right now that house is in your personal name. So if somebody wanted to sue you, they could actually end up, taking that property from you. It's very easy to find out that you're the owner, right? All they have to do is go down to the county and search the public records, put your name, and every single house that you own in that county shows up, right? So you don't want to be that low-hanging fruit that's easy to sue, right? This is a sue-friendly country. So what you want is you want to put yourself in a position to where you get to conceal your identity and people don't know that you own that property, okay? So you're going to quit claim deed it over into the name of the trust. You're going to record it with the county, and now they're going to remove your name as the owner of that property, and they're going to put the trust as the new owner of that property. And now that property is fully protected. So what can a trust actually protect you from, right? So the number one reason you actually want to create a trust is for asset protection. The second reason is to maintain your privacy, right? So what can it protect you from? Bankruptcies, divorce, foreclosures, heavy taxations, lawsuits, probate, just to name a few. So I will go ahead and talk about just a few of these. The first one is divorce, right? So a lot of us, we don't know that a divorce is a transfer of wealth, okay? And it's a lawsuit actually between two spouses, okay? And unfortunately, sometimes one spouse will end up with either half or all, right? And the other spouse will end up with nothing, okay? And so you want to protect yourself from these types of scenarios. And so a trust can actually protect you from the divorce. Why? Because when you are going through a divorce proceedings and you're going through the divorce courts and things of that nature, everything that is in your personal name is what's included in the divorce. So that means your 401k, your car, your house, all of your debt, you like your credit cards, your student loans, things of that nature, right? All the cash that you have in all of your financial accounts, right? Your investment accounts, things of that nature, your pension, all that stuff, right? That's in your personal name. So all of that's included in the divorce. So the way that the trust comes in is because whatever is inside of the trust is protected from the divorce, meaning that the trust is a separate entity from you. That's not you, right? So if the trust owns 5 houses, guess what? That trust is not going to be pulled into that divorce. And so those 5 houses are protected, okay? So that's just an example. The next one is heavy taxation, right? So a lot of us, we are giving away literally 50% of our income to the government, okay? Especially if you live in those states that tax you fairly highly, like California, New York, things of that nature. So what you want to do is you want to use trust within your structure to reduce your tax liability. So how does that work, right? Well, within our structure, we actually have what we call a nonprofit trust. And with that nonprofit trust, what we do is we can actually donate to our own trust, right? Our own nonprofit. And so per the IRS, you can donate up to 60% of your annual gross income, right? So a lot of us, we don't know that. So if you are making $100,000, per year annually, you can donate up to $60,000 of your income to a nonprofit. And then at that point, you're only taxed on $40,000 or 40%, right? So that $60,000 will then go to your nonprofit trust. And then from there, you're able to dispose of it the way you need to, okay? So that can actually help you reduce your taxes and put you in a position to where you can allocate that money somewhere else, right? You can buy crypto, stocks, real estate, you name it. You can do whatever you want with those funds appropriately, right? So just think about that because it's so important for you to be structured the right way in order for you to then be able to maximize the income that you have coming in and actually, make that money grow for you. Next, let's talk about lawsuits, right? So, like I said, here in the United States, this is a very sue-friendly country. So literally, your neighbor wants to sue you, your sibling wants to sue you, right? Anybody and everybody, your clients, they want to sue you, right? Customers that use your products, they want to sue you, right? And so you don't want that to happen. So with that being said, let's just say that you're running a business, right? You're running a business, you're running an LLC, right? LLC stands for limited liability company, right? So you hear it actually in the word. So in the word LLC, right, you have the term limited. So if the company has limited liability, who do you think has the other half of that liability? Right? So the company has half of the liability and the owner has the other half of that liability, right? So if the owner has the other half of that liability, if somebody decides to sue your business, first of all, it's very easy to find out who the owner of that business is, right? All they have to do is go down to the Secretary of State's website, do a business search. They can put in your name, and every business in that state that you own will come up, or vice versa. They'll just put in the name of your business, and then guess what? Your name and your details are right there that you're listed as the owner, right? And so if somebody decides to sue your business, then what is going to happen? If you're the owner of that business and they sue your business and your business loses the lawsuit and your business is not able to cover, that judgment, then the judge might actually pierce through the corporate veil. So they might pierce through that little bit of protection that you have with the LLC. And if they do pierce through it, guess what? They can go after the owner, the authorized member, which is you. So that means that they can go after you for your personal assets. They can take away your house, right? They can literally seize your assets. They can garnish your wages, your W-2, or even your bank account, right? And so you don't want that to happen. So what you want to do is you want to have a trust own your businesses, okay? That is the best way in order for you to be fully protected. Why? Because the trust is going to take full liability for that lawsuit. So they're never going to come after you personally for in the event that the business is sued, right? So now what's going to happen is you're going to remove yourself as the owner of that business. You're going to put the business trust now as the actual owner. And then what's going to happen is if there is a lawsuit, then they'll go after the trust, right? And so that's going to be your first layer of protection between you and that LLC, which is what you want. All right. So now I have a question for you guys. Right. So my next question is, let's just say that you have a house, right? And this house is in your name and you decide not to wake up tomorrow. How do you expect that house to be transferred from your name to your children's name? So a lot of us, we don't think about this, right? We don't think of, us actually having these assets and it being transferred to our kids. So we're just walking around saying, hey, I'm building generational wealth, which is good, but how are your children going to, receive the assets, right? So the question is, if you have a house and that house is in your name and you didn't wake up tomorrow, how do you think that house is going to be transferred from your name to your daughter or your son's name? So anybody can answer. You can come off mute. Tell me what you...
I did say, Christina, they couldn't unless they become the mortgagee. So if they're old enough, they can apply for the mortgage to transfer over into their name, and they take on the expense of that. But they would have to be old enough to do that, right?
So yeah, they would have to be in order to hold the mortgage, but we're not talking about the mortgage. We are talking about the actual like ownership and who has the deed of the property, right?
Yeah,
So
I'm living it now. So you need to put it in a trust and get the deed changed over to the name of the trust, and then the trustee becomes the owner once the grantor passes.
yeah, so right. So the question is, if you don't have a trust, then what does the process look like, right? What does that process look like for if we didn't, let's just say we only had a will, right?
It
And
looks
we
horrible.
didn't wake up.
It looks like probate and lose
Oh
half
yeah,
of
if you're
what
in the
you got.
probate state.
Yes, you guys. Yes, yes, yes. That's exactly what we're going to talk about right now. So, Steve said judge, right? Elizabeth said probate. That you guys are absolutely correct, right? So that is what you want to avoid, right? Because you already know that you want your children to inherit your assets. right? That is their inheritance. So you already know that you want your assets to go to your kids. So you want to do anything in your power to avoid probate. And so the only way to avoid probate, unfortunately, we're all going to go through probate. But the only way to avoid probate is by actually having a trust. That's the only way, right? A lot of us, we think a will is good enough, but a will is not. A will cannot own anything. A will is just a wish list. That's your last will and testament saying, I wish that my daughter will have my house. That's not good enough, because ultimately it's up to the judge. That judge does not know your daughter. That judge does not know you, but you're leaving it up to their discretion of what happens to that house or the money or the cars or the jewelry or any of those assets, right? And you don't want to do that, because you have to think about, you have to think about that period in time, right? So if you, let's just say that you had a house, a car, you had, jewelry, you had cash money, like 7 figures in the bank, right? And all of this stuff is in your personal name, and you had a will, and you didn't wake up tomorrow, your family is going to go straight to probate, right? Why? Because you didn't have your affairs in order, right? And so now your family, instead of them grieving, right, because they just lost the most important person in their life, now they're actually being pulled into court. And now they're going to have to fight to keep mom's house. Now they're going to have to fight to keep dad's house. And all of this can be avoided. Why? Because what you want to do is you want to create your own estate. All of us, we're going to end up with an estate regardless. So we don't even know this information. We don't know that we're going to end up with an estate. So in the event that you pass away and you don't have an estate, guess what happens? The state where you live, right? The state where you're a resident. So if it's Georgia, Florida, New York, that state is going to create an estate for you. And then they're going to put all of your assets in that estate that they created. Okay. Then your estate is now going to go to probate. Your estate is now going to have to be represented by a probate attorney and in probate court. And now it's all up to the probate judge. Guess what the judge is going to do? The judge is going to pay off your debt first, right? So that cash money that you have in the account, those assets, right? So they're going to go to what? Student loan debt, credit card debt, hospital bills, nursing home, all kind of debt or creditors are going to be coming after your estate. So now that the judge decided to pay off all of your debt first, then from whatever is left over, the probate attorney has to get paid. So there's fees involved. The probate court system has to get paid. So there's fees involved. And then whatever is left over is what your children get. That's literally their inheritance. Their inheritance is the leftovers after probate. And I've seen it so many times where the debt, meaning the student loans and credit cards and hospital bills and the nursing home, is so much that the judge says, hey, we have to sell this house in order to pay Medicare, Medicaid, this general hospital. And literally, your children never get to receive your house. You don't know that because you're already in heaven, right? So our kids are losing their inheritance because we don't have our affairs in order. So instead of letting the state of Louisiana go ahead and actually create the estate for you when you're dead and gone, what you need to do is create your estate now while you're living. Get everything set up in order to ensure that your children get what's belonged to them, which is the assets, right? So now let's just look at this probate situation differently. So you have all these assets, right? The house, the car, the jewelry, the bank accounts, right? And you have all this debt as well, right? But guess what? You decided to set up a trust. and create your own estate and put all of your assets in the estate. And now you didn't wake up tomorrow. Guess what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens because everything remains intact and the successor comes in and picks up where you left off. So that means that that house is still going to remain intact because it's in the name of the trust. The car is going to remain intact. It's in the name of the trust. The bank account with 7 figures is going to remain untouched because it's in the name of the trust, right? And your children are the beneficiaries. They're going to be benefiting from all these assets and ultimately receive all of these assets, right? And your successor just picks up where you left off, and your children get to now grieve properly, right? And guess what? The debt that you had, that debt is in your personal name. Those creditors cannot come after your trust estate. So that debt dies with you. That is the best situation for you and your family. So it's important for us to get our affairs in order. So let's head back over to the presentation. I have a couple more slides for you guys, but like I said, you want to avoid the probate process. And so a trust can actually protect you from all of the things that you see here plus more, okay? So let's talk about how to actually build wealth with a trust, you guys. This is my favorite slide out of this whole presentation. So this is what I call the wealth building formula. You have 3 pillars right here in front of you. The first pillar is structure. The second pillar is credit. The third pillar is invest, okay? So with the first pillar, right, this is where we'll focus on for right now. With the first pillar, you need to be able to get structured properly. And if you're not structured properly, you need to get restructured, okay? So I recommend that you have multiple trusts within your structure. Why? Because if you have multiple assets, you don't want to have all of your assets in one trust. That's like having all of your eggs in one basket. You don't want that, okay? So you want to have multiple trusts because different trusts serve different purposes, okay? They're all designed differently, okay? You can customize them for certain things. So these are the 3 trusts that I recommend. The first one is the business trust. So with the business trust, it's actually designed to manage other entities, meaning it's designed to manage other entities like businesses like LLCs and corporations, as well as do business, okay? So with this trust, you can use it in 2 ways. So one, you can actually use it as a holding company. And now this business trust is going to be the owner of your LLC or a shareholder in your corporation. Why? Because remember, we had mentioned it earlier that you want that first layer of protection between you and the LLC, right? And so the business trust is going to be that first layer of protection between you and the LLC. So in the event that somebody sues your LLC, guess what? All of the liability is going to go straight to the actual business trust, and you have no liability. So they cannot come after you personally for anything that is in your personal name, right? Which is what you want. You want that first layer of protection between you and the LLC, okay? So that's the first way, is you using it as a holding company. And then the second way is you actually using it to conduct business. So if you don't want to go and actually set up a LLC or a corporation, you don't have to. You can actually start your business and you can operate it as a business trust. Okay, so that is your entity that you're operating, okay? So it could be anything, any type of business, real estate investing, e-com, retail, anything like that, okay? So with that being said, with the business trust, let's just say that the business trust is the owner of the LLC, right? And the LLC generated $100,000, right? So that $100,000, right? What you're going to do is, for tax purposes, right? You get to, and the thing that I love about these entities is that you spend the money first and you're taxed on the leftovers. So with the LLC, you're going to do your normal deductions as you would with your LLC. And then what you can do is whatever contribution or distribution is going to go to the actual owner of the business, it'll go to the business trust. So if it generated 100,000, and let's just say what you could do is you could distribute the whole 100,000 to the business trust, or let's just say it's 90, right? You had 10,000 in expenses and now you have 90,000. So that 90,000 is then transferred to the business trust, right? So the business trust pays taxes. It is a for-profit entity. So with the business trust, it's the same thing as an LLC, to where you actually get to spend the money first and you're taxed on whatever's left over. So you have all your operating expenses. What does it look like for you to operate your business trust, right? So let's just say that your expenses are $20,000, right? So now out of that 90, you get to deduct 20,000, and now you have $70,000 left. So with the business trust, is taxed anywhere between 10% upwards of 39%. So you would actually have to pay taxes on that 70,000. Or what you can do with this unique type of entity is, instead of you paying taxes on the 70,000, you can just distribute the entire 70,000 to the beneficiary. And then at that point, your tax liability for the business trust is 0, okay? So now that 70,000 went straight to the beneficiary. So what we do is we teach you how to actually have the family trust be the beneficiary of the business trust. Why? Because you're running a business, you're generating income, that money needs to come into your household so that you can actually keep the lights on at home, right? And so you can send your kids off to school and put gas in the car and groceries and things of that nature. So ultimately, the money that you're generating needs to be able to spend on the business, on the family. So what you're going to do is that $70,000 is now going to go to the private family trust, okay? And so now that is considered income for the private family trust, and that family trust now needs to pay taxes. Once again, it's a for-profit entity. So with a trust, it has to file a 1041. So us as individuals, we file a 1040. The trust, which is a separate entity from us, files a 1041, okay? So anywhere between 10 to 39%, right? So now we have that 70,000. So what do we get to do, right? We get to actually spend the money first, and we're taxed on the leftovers. So what does it cost to run your family, right? Well, guess what? Your house is in the name of the trust, right? So all of your housing expenses gets to be deducted, meaning whatever the mortgage is, the taxes, the utilities, right? Grocery, things like that, right? All of those things are considered operating expenses because that's what it costs in order to maintain that asset that's owned by the trust, okay? So let's just say that your operating expenses for the family trust is 50,000, right? So now out of that 70,000, you deducted 50, you have 20,000 left. So from that $20,000 that's left, you have to pay taxes on it, right? So you can pay 10% taxes if you want to, or what you can do is you can donate it, right? Remember, we said that a portion of our gross income can actually be donated to our nonprofit, right? So you need, within your structure, you need a for-profit entity, and then you want a nonprofit entity. Why? Because the nonprofit is going to help you reduce your taxes, okay? So now that 20,000, instead of us going and having to pay taxes on it, we can actually donate it to our tax-exempt nonprofit trust. And then at that point, that 20,000 reaches that trust is exempt from federal taxes. So that trust doesn't need to pay that trust doesn't need to pay income tax on that $20,000. So you're done paying taxes at that point in time, right? So your tax liability is 0 for the family trust and 0 for the tax exempt, right? So this is a very powerful structure that you want to start implementing in your business or in your family so that you can reduce your taxes. Why is it important to reduce your taxes? Because the money that you are not giving to the government, that means you're saving it, right? That money is now extra income that you have that you can now use to acquire more assets. Meaning you can go pick up some real estate. You can dump it into stocks and crypto, right? You can do other things that you need to do with that money instead of it going elsewhere, right? So that's why this structure is so important. So let me just tap in a little bit with the tax exempt trust, right? So that trust, like I said, is exempt from federal taxes. What we call it is, it has different names, but it's designated as a 508c1a trust, okay? And so that is actually the tax code in the Internal Revenue Code, okay? So with that being said, a 508c1a designated trust is actually exempt. It's a mandatory exception for not having to file for a 501c3, meaning that it's automatically exempt from filing or from paying federal taxes. Why? Because of the separation between church and state. So this trust is actually labeled as a church. This trust is labeled as a ministry. This trust is labeled as a nonprofit, right? So there's so many different terms that you can use for it, right? Another one is faith-based organization, right? And so like I said, there's a separation between church and state. So that means that you don't have to go through the traditional route of getting tax exempt with like the regular nonprofits, right? As long as you're operating it a little bit differently, which is as a trust and not as that type of entity, then you'll be exempt automatically, right? And like I said, right, you can donate up to 60% of your annual gross income to the trust and now reduce your taxes on the personal side when you're filing your 1041s, okay? So, I mean, your 1040s. So, like I said, you definitely want to be structured the right way. Let's move on to credit, okay? So now we're in the second pillar. The first thing that I want to tell you guys is about the nonprofit grants, right? So you have a nonprofit within your structure. You do get to qualify for nonprofit grants, and that's extra funds that are coming in your organization, right? So because you're running a nonprofit, it is a charity, right? And so you can do philanthropic endeavors too. So if you have some type of ministry or some type of way of you giving back, just know that you can get nonprofit grants in order to go towards your ministry. If it's helping, you know, the homeless or women and children, things of that nature, just know that. Now, the second thing is you want to put yourself in a position to where you are using OPM, other people's money. So what we do is we actually, or you can actually establish business credit for your business trust, right? That is so profound. And how do you do this, right? Well, your business trust is actually going to get an EIN number. And with that EIN number, it's able to build business credit. The same identical business credit that you get with your LLCs and your corporations is what you get with your business trust, which is very powerful. Why? Because, right, we only are relying on our personal credit. You don't want to only rely on that. You actually want a second credit profile, which is the business trust credit, in order to be able to leverage that. Why? Because now you're going to qualify for higher lines of credit because it's a business, and you're able to get lines of credit and credit cards that you can then use for investments or to acquire other assets, or you can just multiply that money. So that's what you want to do, right? This is what the wealthy do. This is what we do. We actually are using other people's money, which is the bank's money, right? So that's the position that you want to put yourself in. And I'll talk about that in just a little bit. So now let's move over to the next pillar, which is invest, you guys. So this is my favorite part, right? Because we're talking about assets that you're now going to acquire for the trust, okay? So the trust, these are the two investments that I actually recommend. Not investments, but assets. So the first one is the Index Universal Life Insurance Policy, right? So that is actually a cash value life insurance policy. And the second one is real estate. So let's go to the policy, right? So a lot of us, we think that life insurance is supposed to be utilized when we are dead, right? There's like, oh, life insurance is for when you're dead, right? Oh, I'm gonna die and I'm gonna get $1 million and it's gonna go to my kids, right? Well, in actuality, life insurance is supposed to be used when you are living, right? And so we're not taught this information. Why? Because there are so many living benefits when you have these types of policies. You have to have the right policy. There are so many different types of insurance policies, okay? You're receiving, promotion in the mail all the time at home about certain policies and stuff like that. We're specifically talking about a cash value life insurance policy, meaning that it builds cash value, right? So let me dive into this one because it's my favorite. So this one is an index universal life insurance policy. And with this type of policy, like I said, it builds the cash value. So it's completely liquid, and you actually get to have your money compounding, and it's tax-free, right? So your money gets to grow inside of this policy tax-free, which is what you want. Remember, we're in the business of reducing our taxes. So when you hear tax-free, it's like ding, 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 that's the way to go, right? So when we're talking about this policy, you're building cash value. So that means that when you're paying your premiums, right, you have a bucket in there that is designated for cash value. That cash value is going to be earning interest. How? Because with this type of policy, you see the word index, it's actually mirroring a index, right? So that is a part of the stock market. So you have what we call indices in the stock market. That's your Dow Jones, that's your NASDAQ, that's your S&P 500, okay? So now that we know that your money, right, which is the money that's building inside of your cash value, is actually going to be mirroring the market. So your money is not inside of the market, but the insurance company, they're going to look and see what the market is doing. If the market is doing 7%, guess what? They're going to match that, and they're going to give you 7% interest in your cash value, right? So now you're going to be earning compound interest off of the money that you're accumulating inside of your policy, which is extremely, extremely powerful, right? Because you want to eventually put yourself in a position to where you're paying yourself first. That is so profound. And a lot of us, we don't do this. Let's just, be honest, right? And so this is what that looks like, right? So let's just say that you got paid. It's Friday, you got paid. And what's the first thing that happens, right? You're a W-2 employee, you got paid, it's Friday. What's the first thing that happens? Well, when you're getting paid, the IRS actually takes their money first, right? So the IRS did their withholdings, Medicare did their withholdings, Social Security did their withholdings, then you did 401k contributions, right? So that's 4 organizations that got paid before you, okay? So now whatever's left over after they got paid is what you get. You get the leftovers. Where do the leftovers go? The leftovers go into your bank account, right? So you get a direct deposit into your bank account, and that's your paycheck, okay? So now what happens? Well, your money just went into Wells Fargo, Chase Bank, Bank of America. So you just actually paid them. So now Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase just got paid, right? And so what is it that they do, right? Well, they go out and they issue credit cards, they give car loans, student loans, mortgages, all kind of stuff, right? And so they're actually making money off of your money. Why? Because they're lending your money out and they're earning high interest, right? Like those credit cards are like 30% interest, right? So if they're lending your money out, making 30% interest on these credit cards, right? How much are they giving you? So for your money that's actually sitting inside of Wells Fargo, you're earning 0.00000 nothing percent, right? Literally, like the bank is literally not giving you nothing. They're probably going to give you $5, right? Off of the money that you have sitting in your checking account, right? And so a lot of us, we think that the banks are, you know, getting rich off of cars and giving mortgages and credit cards, but their number one asset is actually life insurance, right? It's called BOLI, bank-owned life insurance. Okay, so if the banks are putting their money into life insurance, do you also think that you should be putting your money into life insurance, right? Think about it. Like I said, it's liquid, right? So now you just got paid. Let's just say that you got paid $5,000, right? That's your paycheck. It's direct deposited. It's sitting inside of your account, right? So what is the first thing that you do? So the first thing that you do is you pay your rent or your mortgage. Then you go ahead and pay the light bill, the water bill, the gas bill. You put gas in your car. You put groceries, you know, in the fridge. You pay the kids' tuition. You pay all of these other companies and, you know, and organizations and businesses, right? And then whatever's left over is what sits inside of your checking account. So that is the vicious cycle that we're in. That is what we call the rat race, right? So we need a mindset shift to be able to get out of the rat race. I was in the rat race, literally living paycheck to paycheck as a nurse and frustrated, right? So what we need to do is we need to change our mindset. How do we do that, right? What does that look like? Well, you need to now change the mindset of, instead of paying yourself last, right? Because that's what you do. Because once you pay everybody else, whatever's left over is what you get to enjoy, right? And then what do? You just let it sit in your checking account and it generates $5 from Wells Fargo, right? So you can either keep that going, or you can change your mindset and think, now, how do I put myself in a position to pay myself first? Well, what you want to do is, instead of, so now that you have gotten paid, right, the $5,000, instead of you paying your rent, your mortgage, your putting gas in the car, groceries, utility bills, light bills, all this stuff, right? Instead of you doing all of that first, what you're going to do is you're going to deposit those funds into your life insurance policy, right? So now that money, that $5,000 goes into your cash value. Your cash value just went up by $5,000. And guess what's going to happen? It's going to mirror the market. The S&P 500, which stands for, you know, the Standard & Poor's 500, which tracks the top 500 companies in this country, in the United States. Those companies are doing well, you guys. We're talking about Google, Facebook, Amazon, okay? So typically the market gives you, you know, 8 to 10%. So let's just say we're getting 8%, right? So now you have your $5,000 that you just got paid. You go ahead and you put it inside of your cash value life insurance policy. Your cash value goes up by 5,000, right? It's mirroring the market. The market's doing 8%. Guess what? You're going to earn 8% on that $5,000. That is wonderful, right? Because now your money is making money. In that previous scenario, your money wasn't making money. Now it is. So that $5,000 is going to be earning compound interest, making 8%, right? Or whatever the market is doing. But you need to pay your rent or you're going to get evicted. You need to put groceries, you know, on the table. You need to go ahead and put gas in your car so you can get to work tomorrow. So where is that money going to come from? Well, with this type of policy, you can actually take out a loan from the policy, right? So you can borrow against your cash value life insurance policy. So what happens is you are going to request a loan from the insurance company. They're going to look at your cash value. They're going to say, okay, yeah, John has $5,000 in cash value. We can go ahead and give him $4,800 because they want to leave some cushion in there, right? We can go ahead and give him $4,800, right? But the money, the $4,800 is actually going to come from the life insurance company's reserve. It's going to come from their account. Your $5,000 is going to stay intact in your cash value, earning compound interest, earning that 7, 8, 9%. And the insurance company is going to do a direct deposit or mail you a check, whichever one you prefer, for the $4,800. So now that they direct deposited the $4,800 into your bank account, you're able to pay your rent. You're able to pay the utility bills. You're able to now, put gas in the car so you can make it to work tomorrow, right? You're able to do the things that you are supposed to do, pay the bills that you're supposed to pay. But guess what you did? You paid yourself first. You borrowed against your life insurance policy so that you can cover your bills. Second, right? Why? Why is this so important? Because if you don't pay yourself first, what does that look like? So if you paid everyone else first, then that $5,000 has diminished down to $800. Now you only have $800 left. Where's that $800 going to go? You're going to put it inside of the cash value life insurance policy and instead of letting it sit in Wells Fargo generating nothing, right? But that's only $800. So which one would you prefer to make 8% on? $5,000 or $800? That's why you need to have a mindset shift and pay yourself first, because that is what's going to lead to true financial freedom. And guess what? Your life insurance is going to be owned by your trust. Your trust is going to be the payer of the policy. Your trust is going to be the beneficiary of the policy. So if anything happens to you, guess what? The trust gets the death benefit, right? So that is so important. And I'll talk about that more in just a little bit, okay? But this is the concept of you actually paying yourself first. And this is what you need to start implementing right away if you're intentional about building generational wealth. Let's talk about the next investment or asset, which is real estate, right? So with real estate, like I told you, a trust can actually qualify for a mortgage, right? All you have to do is provide bank statements, right? And so because it's going to be an investment property, what you can do is you can get a DSCR loan, which is debt service ratio loan, right? So that is specifically for investment properties, and typically you will get you can get up to 80% of what the purchase price is, which means that you have to come up with a 20% deposit. So where's that 20% going to come from, right? So you're acquiring real estate for the trust so that the trust can now generate its own income, right? So remember, we are building business credit for our business trust. So now we got qualified for business credit cards, right? So let's just say 25,000, 30,000, 40,000, right? So now guess what are we going to do with those credit cards? We're going to use it for our down payment, right? So what you'll do is you'll strip those credit cards, right? And then you'll be able to use it for your down payment. But remember, we're in the business of paying ourselves first. So before we even use it as a down payment for real estate, what we're going to do is we are going to use it. We're going to funnel that money into our cash value. So let's just say that you have a business credit card for $50,000. You go ahead and strip that $50,000. You go ahead and funnel that money through your life insurance policy, right? So now your cash value went up by $50,000. It's earning compound interest 7%, right? Then you're going to borrow against it. So you're going to borrow from it, right? So they're going to give you, you know, $48,000, right? Hypothetically. And then you're going to use that money as the down payment for the real estate, right? So now you literally just bought a investment property. Let's just say it's a duplex, right? And you just bought that investment property zero down. Why? Because 80% of it came from the DSCR loan, and then the other 20% came from your business credit card. You didn't have to come out of the pocket in order for you to acquire that real estate. So now you have what we call an income producing asset, which is a duplex. That duplex is generating cash flow. That money is what? That money is going to go first to the life insurance policy. You're going to borrow it back out. Then you're going to pay your mortgage and your business credit card. And whatever's left over is your cash flow that sits inside of your trust. You want to actually be able to have the trust sustain itself. You don't want to put yourself in a position to where you're pouring in your W-2 money into the trust. The trust needs to be able to sustain itself. The trust needs to have its own assets that is generating cash flow or income, okay? That's how you're going to build wealth, you guys. So let's move on. I got like 2 more slides for you guys, and then we're going to call it a wraps, and we can answer any questions, okay? So what does it look like in order for you to actually transfer the wealth? We never think about this. All we are doing is focusing on making the money. We don't think about how am I going to transfer all this money that I have to my kids, right? So you want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. And I'm going to say that again. You want to put yourself in a position to where you own nothing but control everything. That is the definition of stewardship, you guys. Stewardship, where you are actually guiding your wealth in the right direction. You're being a good steward of your wealth versus ownership, which is the total opposite. Ownership is where you're the proud owner of this house, right? This house is in your name, right? And so ultimately, what is your goal? Ultimately, your goal is for you to have control over the asset, over the house, right? So you have to understand that if you didn't wake up tomorrow, that house that you live in is still going to be there, right? So what you want is not ownership. What you want is control over the asset while you are living. So that is what stewardship gives you. So you're not going to be the owner of the house. The trust is going to be the owner of the house, but you're going to be the trustee. So you control the house. That is what you want. That is the most important thing, especially when we're leaving a legacy for the 3rd, 4th, 5th generation. So with that being said, that you transitioning from ownership into stewardship is one of the most important things that you can do if you're intentional about transferring wealth. The second thing is when we are actually creating these trusts, the trust is going to create TCUs. TCUs stand for Trust Certificate Units. It's identical to stock certificates. So you know how stock certificates represent ownership in a company? Well, TCUs represent beneficial interest in a trust. So let's just say that you have a trust and it's worth $1 million. That's the net worth, right? You got assets in there, you got cash in there, you have stocks in there. It's worth $1 million. And I'm one of your beneficiaries. You just issued me 25 TCUs. So now that means that I have 25% beneficial interest in this trust estate, which means that if the trust net worth is $1 million, I have a beneficial interest of $250,000, worth. Okay. So that is one way that's going to represent how you're transferring your wealth, right? And so you get to issue those to your beneficiaries. Let's talk about the next one, which is preservation. So once again, we're so focused on making the money that we never ask ourselves, how is this money that I'm making going to last the third and fourth and fifth generation? We never asked ourselves that question, but yet we're walking around saying, I'm building generational wealth, right? There's two tools that you need in order to build generational wealth, right? But preservation is so important. Why? Because how many times have we seen it where athletes, they get a contract for $80 million. You got actors, you got famous families, and the amount of wealth that they got didn't even last the second generation, let alone the third. Why? Because they didn't have these two tools. So what are they? One is the trust. The second one is the cash value life insurance policy. They work as a perfect marriage. You need both in order to preserve your wealth, right? So this is what's going to happen. Your trust is actually going to take out a policy on every single person associated with the trust. Why? Because the trust has a lot of assets, right? So the trust has a house, a car, cash, all kind of stuff. So the house is insured, the car is insured, right? Those are tangible assets. But you are also in the trust. You are what we call a human asset. You are what we call human capital. So the trust also needs to insure you because you're a key player in this entire estate. So if anything happens to you, guess what? The trust is suffering a loss. So the trust needs to be compensated for that loss. So what's going to happen is the trust is going to take out a policy on every single trustee in the trust, as well as every single beneficiary in the trust, as well as every single future beneficiary in the trust. That's where we start to actually create generational wealth. Why? Because, right, if anything happens to those important people, the trust is compensated. So if anything happens to you and you have an index universal life insurance policy or cash value, that, let's just say you have a death benefit of $1.5 million. If you didn't wake up tomorrow, that $1.5 million is going straight to the trust fund. And your children are the beneficiaries. It's protected. And so are they. So it's so powerful in order for you to be able to have these two tools. And every single beneficiary that's born into the trust, that's what we call a trust fund baby. The beneficiaries, they're trust fund babies. So if you have a baby that's born into the trust, right? So your beneficiary just had a baby. The trust is going to take out a policy on them when that baby is at least 30 days old. And then what's going to happen? Now the trust is actually paying into that policy. That policy is building up and earning and building up cash value and earning compound interest off that cash value from that trust fund baby. So let's just say fast forward into the future, that trust fund baby is now 18 years old and they are going off to college and they need to get their first car, right? They have a lot of expenses when it comes to college. So what they normally can do is they can go down to the dealership, they can pull their credit, they can actually, get into a loan, a high interest loan. for $30,000. They bought their first little car. And now they're paying $900 a month to the dealership. Or what they can do is they can go to the trust. They can go to the trust and ask the trustee for a loan. Why? Because the trust can actually issue loans to the trustees and the beneficiaries, and the trust can actually receive loans from the trustees and beneficiaries, which is so profound. So now, instead of the trustee going out to the dealership, the beneficiary, instead of them going out to the dealership, now the beneficiary comes to the trust and asks for the $30,000 so that they can buy their first car. The trustee then goes ahead and signs a check over and hands it over to the beneficiary. And then the beneficiary goes and gets the car. And now that trust fund baby is now going to be paying $300 a month to the trust, right? Because they got a loan from the trust. So now they're paying $300 a month and, you know, a little bit of interest to the trust. So now the trust is earning a little bit of interest. And let's just say, fast forward into the future, that trust fund baby decides to default on the $30,000 and doesn't want to pay the $30,000 anymore. That's perfectly okay because it was a risk-free loan. How? Because the money did not come from the trust fund. The money actually came from the trust fund baby's life insurance policy. So the trustee actually contacted the insurance company and borrowed against the cash value the $30,000 for that beneficiary's policy. That $30,000 came from the life insurance company's reserves. That life insurance company went and did a direct deposit into the trust fund. The trustee then took that $30,000 out, signed over a check to the beneficiary with a promissory note. So it was a risk-free loan. Why? Because the loans from the insurance company do not need to be paid back. They are automatically deducted from the death benefit. So meaning that death benefit of $1 million, that $30,000 is deducted from it. So that means that the trust is going to be paid back because once that trust fund baby, you know, expires, that $2 million that they have in death benefit is going to go straight to the trust fund. And that's how you keep the generational wealth going in the family. That's how you're going to preserve the wealth for many generations and generations to come. If you don't have these type of tools, trust me, it's not going to happen. So that's why it's so important to have both, not only a trust, but a trust and the cash value life insurance policies for everyone associated with the trust. All right, guys. So these are the books that I recommend. I recommend that you guys get What Would the Rockefellers Do? That is a really, really, really good book teaching you guys about what I was just telling you, which is trust and insurance policies and how they work well together. The second book is The Art of Passing the Buck, Volume 1 and 2. That teaches you about trusteeship and how to actually operate a trust. Then Family Wealth, it teaches you how to run your family like a business. Your family is a business, you guys, and you should be running it as such. And it's called a family office. And so this book gives you some good recommendations when it comes to you actually structuring your family like a business. And then the last one is the Complete Book of Trust, which actually teaches you guys about the different types of trust, okay? So it's very important that you guys actually take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight, because this could be your new way of doing business and making profit inside of your business. This could actually solve a lot of problems that you have dealing with asset protection, dealing with saving on taxes, dealing with operating and structure within your business. So you want to treat your business or your family like a big business, like a Facebook, Amazon, Google, right? Not like a little small mom and pop shop, okay? That's not what this is. We're building generational wealth that's going to last 10, 15, 20 generations. And we're starting now, and we're starting with you. So this is a quick little video that I want to show you guys about someone who actually took action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight.
Well, kudos to you all. Again, Christina, it's been a wonderful experience. I've been looking at your videos on YouTube for a while. And, there are a number of people offering trust these days. And, I guess that's the big thing, don't own anything, control everything. That kind of, I didn't say it correctly, but that is the sentiment. And so it seems like the playing field is being leveled now from the rich and people who weren't privy to this information. So thank you for being such a great asset to a community that didn't have this information. And you made it so simple. Thank you for the recordings. Thank you for the step-by-step instructions. Things that we can go back and look at. So we do appreciate you, and thank you, Mom.
Yep. So take action on the information that I provided you guys with tonight. So what we can do is actually we can work together, you guys. So I have a course where you guys can learn all of the information that I was telling you guys. So the course has 43 video modules, right? Where it teaches you what is a trust. It teaches you how to actually set up the trust that I'm recommending, which is the business trust, the family trust, and the tax exempt nonprofit trust, okay? So you get those 3 trust templates, plus you get the video training teaching you guys how to actually fill it out, customize it for you, your family, your business, okay? So that you can start to be empowered, because a lot of us, we don't know that we can actually create our own trust. We think that we have to go to an attorney or to all of these, big time businesses in order to set this up. But no, you can set it up yourself, right? You can create your own contracts. So you get lifetime access to the course. You also get resources and ebooks. So all the books that I just recommended on the previous slide, you get those books inside of the program in electronic version. And then as far as the resources, everything that you need dealing with doing meetings for your trust, dealing with applying for your EINs, opening up bank accounts, filing taxes, everything, you get all of those resources in there. So we give you everything that you need in order to actually operate your trust, and then transfer all of your assets into the trust, like your house, your car, your businesses. We show you how to do that, and we give you the resources and templates that you need in order to fully accomplish it, okay? You also get a Facebook community, you guys. So it's a private Facebook community. So in our community, we have over 500 trustees. So you get access to like-minded individuals who are doing what you want to do, right? They have already set up their trust, their bank accounts, building credit, have their assets inside of the trust. So you get full access to them. Some of them are in your own city, right? So we have them nationwide. And then you get access to our Telegram chat. So our Telegram chat is where, we answer questions, put announcements, things like that. And we just get to have, side conversations and chat. And these are private, right? Only for trustees, okay? And so the course is only $997. And then the second option is if you want to do it, if you want to do it together, okay? So that's done with you. And that is if you need accountability, because the course is doing it all by yourself. You just get the videos and templates and modules and resources, but done with you is where we do it together. So where we do it together is we do a workshop, and it's a week long, okay? So it's from Monday through Friday. It's 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, okay? And we do it as a group. So right now, how we are on Zoom as a group, we do it like that, which is so powerful, because there are other people, learning the same information that you're learning, and they're asking good questions that you didn't even know that you wanted to know, right? So you actually get to learn more by being in that space and place, okay? So with the workshop, right, it's a week long, Monday through Friday. You get everything done in 1 week. You get full accountability and assistance, right? So on Monday, we actually set up the business trust. And what I do is I actually break down every single paragraph of the trust. I'll show you a trust in just a moment. So I break down every single paragraph so that you can actually understand what you're operating. So you can actually know what you are, about to get into, right? What you're setting up. And then we dive into Q&A. On Tuesday, we set up the family trust, then we dive into Q&A. On Wednesday, we set up the faith-based organization nonprofit trust, and then we dive into Q&A. On Thursday, we focus on building business credit for the business trust. So establishing that, getting the fundamentals, as well as getting the funding, right? So that's how you're going to fund your trust and start to acquire these assets or put money into your policy, right? So we show you how to get OPM, other people's money, and then we show you how to do a board meeting so that you guys can start to get your bank accounts for your trust and your EIN numbers with the IRS. And then the last day on Friday, we focus on assets, transferring them. So we show you how to actually transfer your house or any type of property into the trust with a quit claim deed. So we give you the templates for the quit claim deeds and show you how to fill it out, okay? The same thing for a vehicle with a bill of sale and your businesses. And then we show you about infinite banking, which is you learning how to actually set up this infinite banking, right? Where you are going to become your own private bank, right? So instead of you letting, Wells Fargo make all this money off of you, you're actually going to put it inside of your policy. So we learn about those different policies and how to have it with our trust, right? So you get lifetime access to the workshops. The workshops are every 4 weeks. The next workshop, you guys, is coming up this Monday. So it's next Monday, July 29th to August 2nd, okay? We're hitting the ground running. So if you're intentional about this because half of 2024 is already done, then you want to get into the workshop that we have coming up this week, okay? And you just get that sense of security to know that your trust is actually set up the right way. So once you've gone through the entire workshop, then you're going to book your one-on-one with me, and I'm going to review all of your trust documents to make sure everything is correct before you go get it notarized and then go on to opening up your bank account and transferring assets. So the Done With You, the workshop, is only $2,500. And so for you guys that are on this call, right, what I want to do is I want to offer you guys 20% off, okay? So 20% off the prices that you see right there for the next 24 hours. So you can actually go to the website, which is www.wealthytrustee.com, and then you can use the discount code TRUST20 in order to get that 20% off, okay? So this is our contact information. If you have any questions, so you can either call us or text us on that number. You can go to the website, wealthytrustee.com, or you can send us an email or visit us on social media. So now what I want to do is I want to show you guys what an actual trust looks like and what the course looks like. So this is what the course looks like. So like I told you, it's 43 videos. So the first phase is actually you setting up or you getting familiar with what a trust is, right? So what is a trust and who are the grantors, the trustees, the beneficiaries? Then you actually learn about how to set up your tax-exempt trust. So you go through the different sections, the bylaws, how to apply for your EIN. And then you go through the private family trust. So that's going to teach you guys how to set it up, how to apply for your EIN, and then you're going to do the same thing with the business trust. Then we go into tax strategies. Why? Because one of your entities is tax exempt. So we show you how to navigate and apply for that status and how to avoid tax evasion, you guys, right? How to actually properly do your taxes for your trust, okay? And then after that, we go through asset protection. So the first thing you're gonna do is take an inventory of your asset to know which assets are gonna go inside of the trust and which assets are gonna remain outside of the trust. And then from there, we show you how to create your bank accounts, your brokerage accounts, and how to transfer your house, your cars, your insurance policies, your businesses, and how to have board meetings for your trust. And then we go into wealth creation, you guys. So the first thing when it comes to wealth creation is you actually building that business credit. So we show you step by step how to do it. And then you want to invest those trust funds, right? So you can invest those trust funds into the stock market if you want through index funds. And then you can also learn about the infinite banking with the life insurance policies. Then we go into wealth preservation, where you can learn a little bit about a legacy crest and how to incorporate that in your trust. And then the last thing is the resources. So here in the resources tab is everything that you would ever need in order to operate your trust, and then all the ebooks that we promised, okay? So this is what an actual trust looks like. This is one of our templates, okay? So everything that you see in red is what you are going to be filling out and customizing. So you can delete any sections that you want, and you can also add to it as well. So if you feel like something is missing that's more applicable to your family, you're going to go ahead and add it in there. So all of these articles, sections, and provision, this is what's going to protect your assets. This is what is going to hold up in court in the event that somebody tries to sue your trust, right? So this is what you need in order to create your estate. And like I said, I'm empowering you guys to actually create it on your own. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. Do you guys have any questions on any of the information that I went over tonight? And I'll also go through the chat. I see is it LJ or IJ?
Yes, LJ.
Hi
I have
LJ, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Awesome.
That's good. So one of my main questions is, for the family trust, how do I incorporate someone without a social security number?
Okay, so I mean, it's not required. You don't need a social security. So someone who doesn't have a social, they can be a trustee, they can be a beneficiary of your trust. They don't have to be like
Okay,
from
and
the United States or anything.
okay. Would the trust still like protect them and help them operate in society?
Yeah, I mean, so they can run the trust like they would any business. So they can have the trust represent them if if they don't want to put their personal information, they can put the information of the trust, right? So it will protect them as long as they're using it, right? Instead of putting their personal information, they put the trust information, and then the trust protects them.
Okay, and would that also still work with the IUL?
So yes, so the thing is that with the policy, right? The trust is the owner of the policy, but the individual is the insured. And so we do have policies where you don't have to have a social in order to be an insured and to get your life insurance policy. So you can definitely that will definitely work with that policy.
Okay, thank you. I
You're
think that's it.
All right, perfect. All right, next we have Kenya.
I'm here. Sorry.
Hi, how are you?
Nice seeing you again. Well,
Nice to meet you.
I have several questions, but we might be. So I just had to go over again how to transfer the property to the trust. I already did the bank account for the family, but having a little bit of difficulty with getting the EIN for the ministry, because I think somebody else has the same address and the same name.
Okay, so if it's so what you need to do is you need to add the word trust to the name, and then that should be good. If that doesn't work, then you want to do it manually. So you're doing it electronically, and sometimes it'll reject it because it's very sensitive with the names. So you would just print out the SS4 form and fill it out manually and send it in.
Okay, another question. Once I transfer the property into the trust, um, could you still refinance the house to take some equity out?
Yes, you can still refinance. So the trust can qualify for a mortgage, and then also you can also get a home equity line of credit too if you didn't want to go down that route of the refinance. So the trust can do both.
All right. So how can we use the profit from the property for the trust?
So, whatever you're pulling out of the property, the first thing you want to do is you want to funnel it into your insurance policy so that you're earning that compound interest. And then you're going to borrow it back out and you're going to invest it specifically for the trust, right? So, though, whatever in those investments are, like if it's real estate or any other form of investments, it's going to be, an asset that you're going to put inside of the trust. So it could be you opening up a brokerage account and investing in REITs or index funds. So whatever route that you want to go, after you have already started earning the compound interest with the life insurance policies.
Okay, last question, because I know there's a lot of people still that want to ask questions. So one last thing, I think that it's up to $12,000 deductible that you could actually put as a tax write-off for your children. Do they have to be under 18 or they could be an adult? How does that work?
Yeah, so it could be any minor. Yeah, so it could be any minor. Usually, like it's recommended for them to be at least 5 years old, upwards of, close to 18. And then you have to give them a position. And then from there you can give them a salary. And so you want it to be under that threshold. So the last time I checked, it was 12,500. It could be a little bit more now.
14. I think went to 14 now.
14,000.
14. I will have to check.
Okay, yeah. I know it was close. I thought it was like 12,900 or something like that. So, so as long as you don't exceed that, they do not have to pay taxes on that income, but it's 100% deductible for you, deducted off of your your expenses, and then it's tax free for them.
Okay. So they had to be under 18 and have a position, probably, chores and stuff like that.
Yeah, so whatever you have them doing, if they're filing paperwork, shredding paper, cleaning the office space, decluttering your computer, whatever it is that you want to, put on there.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you. But I'm gonna join the workshop you have next week, just to always keep because I still have certain things I still have to set up and you have questions on, but I don't want to take more of your time because I know there's other people waiting.
Yeah,
thank you so much.
You're so welcome. And it's so nice to have lifetime access to those workshops. So every single time we have one, you just jump in there, you get your refreshers, or you finish where you left off.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna do it myself. I was like, if I'm able to have a lifetime access to be able to always ask questions and join the meeting, I think paying the 2,500 is the best option, because we're always gonna have access to you, and we really appreciate your time and dedication, and always willing to answer our questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Kenya. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, me and my team, we're here for you guys. So you guys get a lot of support, like once you enroll into the program. So next we have Taria.
Yes, thank you so much. So my question would be, well, I have just two. The first one would be, is there a minimum deposit that you have to basically invest or transfer? Because I'm starting off my business, but I'm literally just starting it out. It hasn't really progressed yet. I'm like building a website and things. So with that being said, do I need to have like a minimum deposit to invest in, let's say, the life policy, the trustee?
That's a really good question. Okay, so for example, with the life insurance policy, you can get a policy as little as like $100 a month. So and then your life is like fully protected if anything happens to you or your kids or anything like that. So that's the minimum for that. And then are you asking like the minimum to like join the program, or are you asking the minimum of like what, or to fund a trust like with the banks?
To fund the trust with the bank, because I think the one with the program is with the workshop, correct? Like
Yeah, you can either do the course and that's $9.97 and then you can get the discount, or you can actually do the workshop and that's $2,500, you can get the discount. If you still want to qualify for the discount but you don't have the money right now, then you could put a deposit. The deposit is only $200. So if you look inside the chat, there's going to be a link there that says deposit, and you could put the $200 down and that'll save your spot, so that you can secure the 20% off. As far as you actually already setting up the trust and funding it with whatever bank that you choose, whatever their minimum is. So for example, I bank with Truist Bank, and that's where I have my trust funds, and their minimum is $100. So all I did was fund my trust with $100 at the banks when I set up my accounts.
Okay, awesome. So that's typically about it. And then with that being said, that still would be able to grow the interest. Like if I was to do the okay.
Yeah. Like, yeah, because you're gonna use your trust fund to be able to put money into the policies, and then you're gonna be earning the compound interest.
Okay, thank you. That's pretty much what it was. Thank
All
you.
right. You're so welcome. All right. Any other questions? Let me look inside the chat real quick. Elizabeth, do you have a question?
No.
Right.
Hear me? No.
Okay, no problem. All right. So ATL Michelle, she was asking, can someone repeat the 5 things? So you want it to be an express trust, you want it to be discretionary, complex, non-statutory, and irrevocable. So does that protect the house from liens, etc., if it's in the trust? So it actually, anybody can put a lien on your property, even though it's owned by a trust, but it protects them from being able to foreclose on that lien. So they won't be able to foreclose on you. So that lien is just gonna stay there forever until it reaches the statute of limitation, and then it'll be removed. So let's see here. Let's see here. So somebody was asking about living outside of the United States. So right now, the trusts that we provide are domestic trusts. So they work in the entire United States or the whole nation and all of the U.S. territories. So like Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands, things like that. So inside of the program, we are going to be offering a international trust shortly. So if you get into the program, you'll have access to that and lifetime access to that. Let's see, somebody said they want to schedule a one-on-one meeting. So you do have my calendar link there. If you guys have any questions about insurance, go ahead and click on the link that says our book a call with our insurance partner, because that is the best way for our insurance partner. She's very thorough and she's the best in the business. And so she will be able to look at your specific situation, or what, give you a snapshot of your financials to see which policy is the best policy for you and how you can get this infinite banking up and running. And then let's see here. Somebody asked about the recording. So you can watch the replay on YouTube. So on YouTube, you'll be able to click on our YouTube channel. Please go ahead and subscribe. And we are live streaming right now, so you can actually watch the replay there. And The discount code again is TRUST20. So go to www.wealthytrustee.com. And like I said, our workshop is coming up next week. So it's next week, Monday through Friday. So if you guys are ready, then go ahead and enroll into the workshop so that we can hold your hand through the whole process and hold you accountable, and you don't have to do it by yourself.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay, this is LJ again.
Hey, LJ.
So I actually have two questions. So if I was to get the course right now, and then later on decide that I actually need like you to hold my hand through it, like with the workshop, do I have to like make two purchases, or am I able to just like upgrade it?
Yep, you can upgrade. Yep. So you can upgrade to either you can upgrade to done with you, or I do offer private sessions. The private sessions are 10,000. So if you wanted to do private sessions with me and not do it as a group, that's also an option too. But yeah, you can start with a DIY, and it's very, very, very thorough. So majority of the community, they have success with it. Some people do need accountability. Their schedules are hectic and they don't have the time to do it by themselves. And so then they, want to upgrade to the workshop. And like I said, you get lifetime access to it. So you can definitely upgrade, and all you have to do is just pay the difference. So that difference is probably going to be like 1,500 or something like that, or whatever is applicable with if you get it with a discounted rate.
Thank you. And my second question is, with the workshop, I know you said it's all week. Would it be like a situation where like I would need to take off work to be like proactive in the workshop?
Well, some people actually do it while they are at work. So what they do is the workshop is recorded. So while they are at work, they're just, they have an iPod or earpod or something like that. They're listening to the workshop. And then sometimes they're just putting their questions in the chat. And then after the workshop, they'll go into the replay and start actually setting up their trust documents.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Yeah, that's ultimately up to you if you want to take the time off. Some people do, and then others don't. They just take extra time after work to review the replays.
Okay, thank you.
You're
And my
welcome.
baby is saying hi. I know you heard her say hi.
Yes, she's so sweet. I
Thank
love
you.
it. You're welcome. All right. Chanel said, will an irrevocable trust be considered a reporting company if I'm operating the LLC under the trust? So if you're operating the LLC, if the trust owns the LLC, the trust is the holding company, or sometimes you can use like parent corporation, or you can use management company. And they're managing the LLC. How often do you offer the step-by-step assistance? So it's once a month. So for this month, we're offering it next week, and then we are going to do the end. So it's the last week of every single month. So it's every 4 weeks is the workshop. Since the LLC is in the trust, do I still need to do the certificate of authority? So yeah, you do, because the LLC still exists. Let's see. iPostal sent me a message that I have to fill out the beneficiary ownership info required by the CTA. Yeah, so if you have a entity that is a LLC, you have to do the beneficiary ownership information. So you still do have to fill it out for the LLCs. You just don't have to fill it out for trust or for nonprofits. So just because you have an LLC that's owned by a trust doesn't mean that you're exempt from filling out the CTA, the beneficial ownership info for the CTA. You still have to do it. What do you need to bring to Truist? You need to bring a certificate of trust, and then you also need to bring your EIN letter, and that'll put you in a position, and then proof of identity that you are actually the trustee. If I have any family members with precondition, will they be able to get the life insurance policy? So yeah, it just depends. So for example, let's just say they had diabetes. You know, as long as they're on, you know, metformin or something like that, or is controlled, then that's fine. Let's just say that they had a history of cancer, as long as it's like outside of a certain time frame, like usually I think it's like 10 years, then they're fine. Right? So they do a medical, and it doesn't mean that if you have something that they deny you. No, they work with you. Everybody has a little bit of something. So they'll just give you a certain tier. So like, you know, let's just say A is for like perfect health, and B is for like if you have like, you know, high blood pressure, and C is for like something else. So that's how it goes. Are the workshops always during the day? Yes. So they're always in the middle of the day, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to 2 p.m. So it's 3 hours per day, and it's Monday through Friday. It's 1 week long. So we usually don't have we don't have them in the evenings. So like I said, we do have the replays that are available, and then you could attend, you know, during the times, and then after that, book the one-on-one calls with me. Can the $200 be deposit be allocated to DIY? Yes. Yeah, so if you put the $200 deposit, that is for you to secure your spot so you can get 20% off. The 20% off could be for do it yourself, or the 20% off could be done with you. So whichever one you want. So if you want to secure the 20% off for the next 24 hours, go ahead and put in your deposit, and the link is in the chat. How do I transfer my property to the trust? You need to fill out that quit claim deed and get it notarized. And then from there, you submit it to the county recorder's office, and then they'll be able to remove you from the ownership, and they'll be able to add the trust as a new owner. All right. And then Namir says, greetings, Empress Christina. Ashe. All right. What's up, Namir? And then what if I am the trustee of the trust? Do I just show my ID? Yes, you do. You have to prove that you're the trustee. You have to show identification. What is the benefit of placing an asset in the LLC, then in a trust, versus just placing the asset directly into the trust? You do not have to place an asset in the LLC. The LLC is an asset. The LLC goes inside of the trust. Your business is an asset. It has ownership attached to it. That ownership is going to be transferred from your name to the name of the trust. Any other assets like a house or a bank account, those can be directly owned by the trust. You don't want them to be owned by the LLC, because any assets that are in the name of the LLC is still going to end up in probate. So the only way to avoid probate is by having those assets in the name of the trust. All right, guys, so that is it for the questions. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Like I said, you can go to our YouTube channel, like, comment, subscribe. We really appreciate it. And you can watch the replay, and then just take action on the information that was provided for you guys tonight, because you are generational curse breakers. And so it's up to you to be able to set this up for your family so that your kids' kids are now trained as trustees, and you're changing the trajectory of their life. So with that being said, God bless you guys, and I will see you next time.